All right, we'll get it started. The City Council Committee on Government Services, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, will meet remotely Monday, March 29th, 2021 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of meeting with Governor Baker's office regarding jobs and housing in the city of Salem, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Committee on Government Services, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirements to attend this meeting can be found on the city's website at salem.com. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post the City of Salem's website an audio or video recording, transcript, and other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Individuals may participate remotely in the meeting via a remote participation platform called Zoom. Please click the link below to join the webinar. Password 030554 or telephone 888-475-4499. Okay, so we have in attendance here, we have Chris Kletchman and Peter Milano from Secretary Keneally's office. Appreciate both of you joining us here. Chris is the Deputy Director of the Community Services Division, and Peter is the Senior Director of Business Development. They both agreed to join us here today just to talk through economic development, housing, the housing choice legislation, and then answer any questions that either members of the committee, members of the council, the Committee of the Whole, or the Affordable Housing Trust Fund have. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Number one, I would like to wrap this up by 7 p.m. if possible. We can go just a little bit over, but both Peter and Chris have tight schedules, and we want to try to accommodate those. Also want to keep the discussion productive. I would appreciate no leading questions, no grandstanding. This is just a very informational meeting. I think we all sort of need a lot of this information and hope that we can just sort of have a productive conversation moving forward. So, Chris, would you prefer to go first, or Peter, who would? And I can present.
Why don't we let Chris go first, just in case she has to jump off? She does have a hard stop.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whereas I asked for this meeting and I submitted the order, I'd like to speak briefly for about 15 seconds, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure. This meeting came about by our mayor giving basically incorrect information to our good governor, who I truly support. And then him.
Councilor Dibble, we're not going to do grandstanding here. We're not about personal opinions. We're asking
Chair.
Of
Chair, I am in order, and I did not mention anybody's name, and I'm not grandstanding.
Councilor Dibble, you are grandstanding, and you did just mention the mayor's name. So let's move on to Chris's portion of the presentation, please.
So I'm not permitted to say anything then.
Not if it's to denigrate the mayor and denigrate other people.
In your words, I will not grandstand. Okay. I just want to point out that the order and the discussion was for higher paying job industry and for senior related housing. Okay, that was supposed to be the focus of this meeting per my conversation with Secretary Keneally and his office. I'll leave it to that, Mr. Chair. Let's get on with the meeting. I know you have a hard stop, and hopefully there's time for some comments without grandstanding at the end.
That would be really nice.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Well, thank you so much for having both of us here today. Really looking forward to talk. I'm going to talk you through a presentation about the housing choice legislation. And I think it's best if you can save your questions to the end of the presentation, just in case I cover them. As many of you know, so I've been running the Housing Choice Initiative for the last 3.5 years, and that initiative has several legs to the stool, so to speak. It is a program that encourages members to, it encourages communities to build more housing by providing a designation process and a reward system for that. Councillor Hepworth, I'm seeing a little guy in the middle of there we go. Thank you. If I could have the next slide, thanks. And so I'm happy to say that Salem was designated as a housing choice community last year and is eligible to apply for capital grants. So, but another part of the Housing Choice Initiative is the legislation. And the legislation, as many of you know, it was a multi-year effort. Secretary Keneally joined Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito kind of on a campaign trail over the last several years to try and proceed to get this legislation passed. In general, the legislation tries to make it easier for communities to pass housing supportive zoning amendments. It does not require folks, with the exception of the MBTA communities, but the main thrust of the legislation does not require communities to adopt any particular zoning amendments other than that related to the MBTA communities. And we want to see a more predictable, more certain way for housing to be produced. Next slide.
Are you seeing the full slide just to make sure you're
I'm seeing a presentation view, which is okay for me. The slides could be a little bit bigger, but
let me try that again.
Thank you. So what the next slide is going to show was there was, in addition to the long time frame, thank you, and then the next slide, thank you, Councillor. In addition to this long time frame, where in January, Governor Baker signed the provisions of the housing choice legislation and the economic development bond bill, there was this real campaign that went on where those leaders met with communities from Provincetown to Williamstown and 13 different stops, held a public hearing that packed Gardner Auditorium in May of 2019. The picture in the middle, in the bottom, shows the very kickoff of the whole initiative, where Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito were joined by over 200 local leaders from across the state. And the next slide. And so, and Governor Baker and the Baker-Polito administration is pursuing these changes to deal with the housing crisis because there really is, frankly, a crisis. Even before COVID-19 created other crises related to housing, Massachusetts was facing a housing crisis, and a lot of that was a lack of supply. The chart here shows housing construction of new units from 1960 through 2018. Single family in yellow and multifamily in blue. And what that chart shows in terms of actual numbers was between 1960 and 1990, the Commonwealth as a whole built 900,000 new housing units total. Between 1990 and 2020, we built half of that. So there really has been a major slowdown in the amount of housing. Our population has not stopped increasing. People have not stopped aging. There are all sorts of needs that are no longer being met. The constraint on the housing supply increased our housing prices and rents. If you've heard Governor Baker speak on this issue, you know that he will say, we'd love to be number one in lots of different things. We do not want to be number one in the highest housing costs and the highest rental costs, or in the top 5 of the highest housing costs in the country. Homeowners and renters are all many homeowners and renters are cost burdened. That is, they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And in 2017, 25% of renters were paying more than 50% of their income towards rent. And that's just looking at the state as a whole. We know municipalities have through our laws, have a crucial role in housing, in that you control what happens at the local level in terms of zoning. And the zoning that's been on the books for 100 years until 2021 required a 2/3 or supermajority vote by a legislative body, in your case, the city council, in order to adopt zoning amendments. That 2/3 majority was put in place in 1920. So 100 years ago, it was put in place when women did not have the right to vote. It is an old law that does not necessarily reflect what is happening in today's world. Next slide, please. So this chart shows our housing, for sale housing price indexed to 1980. And in 1980, the Commonwealth, and so what's on this chart here are Massachusetts in blue and other states, California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and New York, kind of some of our competitor states. It shows their housing prices indexed to 1980. So back in 1980, we were kind of right in the midst. We weren't necessarily, higher than these. All of these states were the same. But over time, you can see that our housing prices have climbed at a higher rate and has superseded these other states, these other competitor states. And so this is one of the reasons that if, again, whether it's Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito, Secretary Keneally, what you hear them will say is that housing is important for our economy, because if workers cannot afford to buy housing, it's going to have an impact on the economy as a whole. Next slide. So that's just a very quick walkthrough of some of the data behind the housing crisis that Massachusetts found itself in, and really provides the backdrop of why we wanted to make it easier for communities to approve housing amendments. So again, the very simple thing is to take several zoning amendment best practices, kind of pro-housing zoning amendments, such as the 40R districts and others, and make them easier to adopt at the local level. That from that 2/3 majority to a simple majority, which is 50% plus one. Next. A couple other things that the legislation did, just very quickly, is it allows adjacent municipalities to enter into revenue sharing agreements when you have a development that might affect both governments, but the revenues from the government are all in one taxing authority. For example, a development where all of the traffic might route through one community, but the other community is getting the revenue benefits. So by simple majority vote of both legislative bodies and approval of the Department of Revenue, this can now, these revenue sharing agreements can now be done. These had been done in the past, but you needed a home rule legislation to do it. So now it's just enabled. There's also a provision to try and discourage frivolous appeals of projects that allows the land court or superior court to establish up to a $50,000 bond if they find that there's again, kind of a frivolous lawsuit where the defendant or the public interest is harmed and it outweighs the plaintiff's objection to the project. And then it also, the legislature added the MBTA communities section, which provides for MBTA communities, of which Salem is one, that shall have a zoning ordinance that allows multifamily up to 15 units an acre by right, or without a special permit, without a discretionary approval. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Councilor Hepler, next, please. So I'm going to jump in. I have provided Councilor Hepworth with a PDF of this presentation, so you'll be able to absorb the information over time. These slides, I will say, are packed with information, so I don't expect you to absorb it immediately, but you'll be able to study it at your leisure. So here are some of the zoning amendments that qualify for that simple majority vote. If you're adopting amendments that allow for multifamily or mixed use in an eligible location as of right. So again, not with a special permit, but perhaps with either somebody goes right to a building permit, or perhaps if you have a site plan review, that qualifies as of right. Accessory dwelling units that are in a attached to a dwelling can be permitted as of right. That kind of amendment would require a simple majority. Open space and residential development subdivisions, if those are allowed by right, they can be approved by a simple majority. And then we recognize that special permit is a way that many local governments do business. And so special permit zoning amendments that would allow for these types of developments by special permit, that amendment qualifies for simple majority. Again, multifamily and mixed use in an eligible location. Eligible locations are things like your city center and in areas of concentrated commercial activity or near other activity centers. Much of Salem is probably in an eligible location, and I have a little bit more if you have questions about that. detached accessory dwelling units by special permit, if you're increasing density through a special permit process, or if you're reducing residential parking requirements. Other kinds of zoning that qualifies for simple amendments include changes to dimensional standards that would boost housing unit production, such as allowing for a higher height, reducing parking, reducing open space, reducing setbacks, decreasing lot area, which has the effect of increasing density. If you're going to adopt a 40R smart growth district, natural resource protection zoning and transfer of development rights also qualify. Next slide. So I'm going to give some examples because I know for me, when I think about this stuff, and I think about zoning a lot, and I've thought about it a lot in my career, but most normal people don't do that. So here's some examples that might help. If your municipality has zoning and you want to allow for accessory dwelling units up to 800 square feet, within or attached to the primary dwelling, as shown in this illustration here to the right, that if you changed your zoning to allow for that vote on the zoning would be a simple majority. However, and the legislation does define accessory dwelling units as not larger than half the size of the main house or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. So let's say a community comes forward and says that they wanted to allow up to 1,200 square foot accessory dwelling units as of right. That actually does not qualify because it does not meet the statutory definition that's been defined. Other examples are reducing the minimum area to develop housing, such as changing from 1 acre zoning to half acre zoning, and a couple more examples there. If a city wanted to adopt a 40R district that allows multifamily units in downtown near a commuter rail station, that adoption would be a simple majority. And here there's an example of an 11-member city council. So instead of 8 votes out of 11, you'd only need 6 out of 11. Again, I have a variety of examples in here for communities of all sizes. Some communities, I have an example about what happens in a very small town meeting, which I won't go into. But again, increasing density wherever it is would qualify for a simple majority. Just to be clear, there are still many kinds of zoning amendments that will continue to require a 2/3 majority. For example, if you're changing the zoning map from limited business to heavy industrial, that's a 2/3 majority. If you're decreasing the density of an area, that would require a 2/3 majority. So there still will be many zoning amendments will require a 2/3 majority vote that you will see. There is one part of the legislation that goes into the board vote when you have, and there's a technical term here in zoning called a special permit granting authority. Typically, this might be a planning board or a zoning board of appeals that might hear projects that are being reviewed through a special permit. So one example of that and there's certain situations where the board vote and so a special permit under Chapter 40A now requires a supermajority board vote. So if you have a 5-member board, you would need 4 out of 5 votes. But in certain circumstances, such as this example, that board vote of the special permit granting authority board would drop to a simple majority. So that, and the situation, this is an example of that, which is that you already have underlying zoning that allows for multifamily and it's near a commuter rail station, and a project comes in with a special permit to get approved by a 5-member planning board. It's near the commuter rail. It has at least 10% affordable units, and that project, instead of needing 4 out of 5 votes, would require 3 out of 5 votes. And this is important for those of you who have been involved in those kind of boards. Often just the quorum and who's heard, how that hearing has gone and who's eligible to vote can delay a project for months. And so I really see this as something that might help speed up housing approvals. Next. So in cities, there is a protest vote, and that has been changed by this legislation. Prior to this legislation, if 20% of affected landowners or abutters wanted to protest a zoning vote, they could do so to the legislative body, so in your case, the city council, and instead of needing a 2/3 majority to confirm that zoning, if it's protested, you'd need a super majority of a 3/4 vote in order to uphold the amendment that was originally passed. The law has changed, Chapter 40A has changed, changes those thresholds. It requires 50% of the landowners to protest in order to successfully protest an amendment vote. And it makes it easier for that legislative body to affirm the amendment that had been already passed. Instead of needing that 3/4 majority, it's a 2/3 majority. This protest vote does apply to all zoning amendments, not just the housing choice simple majority amendments. It applies to all. And so that's just a change in that's just a change in that section of Chapter 40A. Next slide. So you might be asking, okay, well, we've created a process by which there are two different kinds of voting thresholds on zoning amendments, and the law does not say exactly whose job it is to figure that out. So we have put out some guidance, and in the presentation I have a website, a web address where you can find all of the guidance that has been given to date. And that guidance was posted in February that has a couple of recommendations. So when you are, when a proponent is putting forward a zoning amendment, whether that's the planning board, staff, could be a property owner, we recommend that when the zoning is first introduced, that there be a very specific statement of why they think something requires a simple majority vote and by what criteria it can meet that. And then we recommend that at the planning board's required hearings, that, after consulting with their legal counsel, that the planning board should actually report in it, as the planning board reports out its recommendation on the proposed zoning, it should also include a report about the determination of the voting threshold. This is, again, our recommendations to you to try and be clear. And then when the city council is taking a vote, that vote can be consistent with the zoning threshold that's been discussed throughout the public process. This doesn't apply to you, but the Attorney General's office has a section called the Municipal Law Unit. And for towns that go through town meeting, they must approve all zoning amendments. That doesn't apply to cities. Your city solicitor is kind of the last word unless you have litigation. However, the Attorney General's office, once they start ruling on some town meeting bylaws about about this simple majority, I think there's going to be some precedent set. And so even though you're a city and you're not subject to their approval, you may be on the lookout for what their decisions are and what the precedents are in terms of this new legislation. So there's a section we're kind of referring to as the MBTA communities. This was added by the legislature, but signed by the governor, and it adds a new section 3A. These are all changes to Chapter 40A, the zoning statute, and it says that if you're an MBTA community, which is a group of 176 communities that are served by the MBTA or are adjacent to communities that are served, that you must have at least one zoning district with a minimum density of 15 units an acre, where that is permitted by right. It must not have any age restrictions, and it must be suitable for families with children. And if you have a commuter rail station, then that district should be located within a half a mile. And then we are directed, my agency, Department of Housing and Community Development, is directed to issue guidelines to help communities figure out how they're in compliance and what compliance means. There is a penalty for this if you do not comply with this, that you may not be eligible to apply for MassWorks infrastructure grants or housing choice capital grants. Pretty much right away after the legislation was passed, we issued a preliminary guidance on January 29th to be very clear that because there is no guidance for local communities, that everyone is eligible to apply for MassWorks and housing choice grants in the upcoming grant rounds until there is guidance. And so everybody's in compliance right now. Next slide. And this process is going to undergo a robust stakeholder process over the next couple months. We're going to be having representation from municipalities that are MBTA communities, from advocates, from also agencies, Mass Department of Transportation, the MBTA, to try and get this right. And so that stakeholder process, again, is going to take place, is going to unfold in the next couple weeks. And then there'll be information about the schedule and how you might how you might give your own input and what the stakeholder process is. That'll be posted fairly shortly. Next slide. So this is the website that I mentioned, mass.gov/housing choice. That will lead you to all of the guidance that's been posted. We've also, about 2 weeks ago, posted frequently asked questions. The responses in those frequently asked questions are official guidance. And so you can look to those to try and help you understand certain things. We are going to be updating those frequently asked questions and guidance. As I mentioned, we'll have more information on the stakeholder process, and we'll be updating that. So that's and I'm going to look maybe at Amanda and Tom and say, as staff, you certainly might want to bookmark that website because it is something that will be updated frequently over time. And then if you have a question that you want to pose, you can pose that to housingchoice@mass.gov. We may not be able to answer every individual question, but it actually really helps us as we're preparing guidance and presentations and frequently asked questions to understand what your question is, what your questions might be. And we try and prioritize the kind of highest need and most frequently asked question in terms of what guidance we put out first. So I think that's what I have for questions. I mean, that's what I have, and I'm happy to answer questions.
So thank you, Chris, and I'll open it up to the committee here in a minute. I guess the first question I had, I think I might have been writing it down, is around the MBTA communities. How many roughly are not in compliance right now if we were to hold them to the standard that this is asking for? Do we have an estimate of what that would be? I
don't have an estimate. We have a working group. The legislation requires us to work with MassDOT and MBTA, and we are actively working with them. And that's actually one of the first things that we're doing, is to try and take a cut at who do we think is actually in compliance now. As we roll through the stakeholder process, I mean, there's a couple things that we need to do. One is we need to set up a process for communities that haven't ever contemplated multifamily at this density. And again, I mentioned 176 communities. It is a wide array of communities, some urban and some very rural. So we have to deal with how long it will take those communities on one hand to come into compliance. And then we also have to set up a process for how do communities that think they're in compliance, how do you ask for compliance, a compliance letter? And so we're working on both of those things kind of at the same time.
Okay. You mentioned MBTA adjacent communities. Mm-hmm. Would that include, for instance, a community like Marblehead, which isn't, well, maybe it is serviced by the MBTA. Okay. You can serviced by MBTA buses, even not just the commuter rail.
The definition of MBTA communities is actually a statutory definition. It's in Chapter 161, Section 1, 161A, Section 1. And it's basically, there's just a definition. There's 14 inner core communities. There's 51 other communities. 51 communities that kind of have immediate bus service. And then there's these other communities, and that includes commuter rail service communities and the ones that are adjacent to it. So again, it's 176 communities. It's many. It's a wide swath.
Thanks. Anybody else from the committee that has any questions for Chris? Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, and Peter, thank you in advance as well for being here. This meeting came about as a request from Councilor Dominguez and myself, who met with Secretary Keneally. So a big thank you to the governor and to the Secretary Keneally's office for scheduling this. The original discussion talked about Secretary Keneally offering a training of specific state programs that would help the city of Salem grow our senior and low-income housing and to help recruit businesses, higher paying job industries here to Salem. So I'm wondering, with the housing side of things, can we talk a little bit about what specific programs might be available very briefly in terms of the city of Salem recruiting developers to build more senior housing and to build low-income housing inside Salem? What programs might be available through the state to help us?
Sure, Councilor Dibble. There are many, many, so I'm not going to be able to list all of them. But there are programs. I mean, one of the things, the housing choice legislation was actually part of the economic development bond bill. And so that included a lot of additional funding for programs for transit-oriented development. Now, that is affordable housing that is close to transit. It included funding for climate resilient housing in order to make housing more resilient. It included a neighborhood stabilization program, $50 million for communities where the preservation of housing is just as important as building new housing, because you may have housing, but it might not be in great shape. And you would like to encourage redevelopment of those units into safer units. There is and then we do get, funding from the federal government with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and run the program that Department of Housing and Community Development runs for affordable housing projects, which is there's a competitive rental round program that's available for CDCs and other housing developers throughout the Commonwealth. So those are all programs, but again, the Economic Development Bond Bill included several new and increased programs, including increases for rental assistance as well. So there are many new programs in that Economic Development Bond Bill.
Thank you, Chris. Through the chair, if I might ask, can you touch upon senior housing? How can we recruit developers to come here and build senior housing using some state programs that Secretary Keneally mentioned?
I'm sorry, Councilor Dibble, I'm going to maybe have to check in with Secretary Keneally's staff. Again, those funding sources can be used, and as can private lending can be used for senior housing. There's a variety of different kinds of senior housing, some that, whether it has units that are set aside as affordable, whether it's built as an entirely affordable project. The community development corporations, I know you have several very good ones in your area in the North Shore. That provide services and are developing all sorts of housing. Again, all of the programs that I mentioned are available. I'm not sure exactly what the market is for senior housing in Salem per se, just because I'm not super familiar with the North Shore market. But I know we certainly have an aging demographic, and so sometimes it's not just state-funded programs, but I'll say almost all affordable housing projects are a combination of subsidy from a variety of different sources, in addition to private lending as well.
Sure. There's a huge need, if I may, Mr. Chair. There's a huge need for senior housing here in Salem. I've talked to maybe 150 seniors that are looking to move out of their house, but there's no place for them to go. So if you could circle back with us, I'd love to hear about the senior programs that might be available through the state. Senior housing, I'm sorry.
Sure, I'll check into that. I would mention that, you might have heard me, I talked about accessory dwelling units several times during my presentation, as those are some of the specific types of housing that we'd like to see more of, and that the legislation targets. The AARP has been promoting accessory dwelling units as a way to help people age in place in their communities for years now. Whether you have let's say a house that you have, your children have left, and you no longer need such a big house, and you want to create an accessory dwelling unit for yourself to move into and have somebody else take the bigger house, or whether an accessory dwelling unit might actually help you pay taxes over time as your income becomes less as you're a senior on retirement income. So accessory dwelling units are certainly one kind of housing that helps folks age in place in your community. That's
correct, Mr. Chair. If I continue, the ADUs are on the agenda for tomorrow night, and we've been having discussions on ADUs for just over 2 years now. So it'll be interesting to see where that one goes tomorrow night. To start with tomorrow night, the joint public hearing to get that ball rolling is tomorrow night. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Councilor Dibble. Anyone else from the committee? How about the committee of the whole? And Affordable Housing Trust Fund, any questions for Chris? Felipe?
Thank you, Councilor Hepworth. Chris, thank you so much for the presentation. I've been wondering a little bit more about the transportation development laws that have been implemented because of these changes that you've shown to us tonight, especially because of the lack of access of land that we have around our public transit in Salem. And I'm not sure if you can give any insight to this right now. And you can perhaps just give very generally speaking, how would you envision some of the recommendation to go for municipalities that either A, already have some usage for the land that's in proximity to the public transit, and that perhaps the usage might not meet, let's say, environmental standards, like too close to the water and you can flood very easily, or perhaps places that already have a very strong standing community. I think of Swampscott, for example, which is on the way as I commute home, and they've got a very low density, but a very well situated community around their commuter rail station already. How are some of the ways that you're envisioning perhaps working with municipalities that have these kinds of struggles, that have something in place or something that's in development, or the usage is already for something else other than housing, and maybe there's a new construction happening, and that's a little bit of a specific example in Salem, and that perhaps the vicinity might not perfectly meet yet, but it's only one commuter rail station, and yet that community is trying to do everything they can to be in compliance. And I understand there's waivers that you can give and everything of the sorts without having to go too much specific. But if the community really does want to take advantage and build more housing in that area, how do you envision perhaps working with those municipalities to make this happen when you have all of these unique outside factors that could perhaps inhibit that community from adhering to the really great policies that have been put in place to try to build around public transit?
Thank you. Those are a couple questions there, and they're very wise questions. So I do expect, so one thing that's in the Economic Development Bond Bill is there's a new community planning grant fund that is just starting in the fiscal 22, which is the kind of current grant round. I expect that there is also probably some technical assistance that may come out of the transit-oriented development housing section of the bond bill. And so we are working on coordinating that now so that we can provide resources and technical assistance to communities to do what you're trying to do, which is figure out how, where can they put stuff, what's available, what might be redeveloped. I happen to know, I think Swampscott has a 40R district, and they're about to redevelop a large multifamily project right at their commuter rail station. So I think Swampscott's kind of on their way. But I hear you. The Section 3A, that's the MBTA communities, does include some exceptions for wetlands and exceptions for lack of sewer. There are other barriers. The train tracks, for one, is literally a physical barrier that can make development difficult. And we're trying to, as we look at putting out the guidance about the MBTA communities, again, we'll put out drafts and then take comments and then, hear more from folks. We're trying to be as expansive as we can into determining what is first, just to give you an example, when you think about it on a map, you think, oh, okay, well, you just put a pin in the middle of a commuter rail station and you measure a half a mile radius from that. And then that's your, and then it's a circle. Well, development doesn't happen in a circle. Commuter rail stations are often bigger than just obviously the center point of a circle. There might be a parking structure. I don't know who owns your parking structure, but there's the facility itself. In other places, there are surface parking lots. Sometimes the T owns property right near. It might be a yard. It might be a salt shed, or I don't know, it might be some kind of train related infrastructure. So we're trying to be clear when we talk about a half mile radius, that it's maybe not just that pinpoint, it's not just a circle and a diameter, and it has to be within that. So those are the kind of things that we're thinking through right now, and also trying to address technical assistance for communities and thinking through how we can help folks think about exactly the questions that you have.
Councilman Hepworth, if I may, through you to Chris once again, thank you for that. And I guess a follow-up question that kind of originated from a point that you made about MBTA property. Do you envision that DHCD and other departments might actually be interested in coordinating with MassDOT to help municipalities utilize perhaps air rights of stations where permissible? Imagining if there might be some creativity in denser zones that you might not be able to do much, but there might be opportunities to build things overhead where there is if there is any opportunity. I think specifically, let's say for like this corridor between the Point in Salem and where the police station resides, where it's just the airway that's open there. And I wonder if areas like that perhaps even could be deemed part of this idea. So I wonder if Mass DOT is kind of get ready to be part of the housing development portion of the conversation.
Yeah, that's a really creative idea. I will certainly bring that back to my colleagues that I'm working with, because I like that idea. I haven't heard it mentioned. The T does participate in, seeing if they have any land that is surplus land. It is, as you guys might imagine, it's rather complicated. They do have to find that it is surplus before they can sell it. And, sometimes the transportation infrastructure doesn't lend itself to being surplus, I guess, for what it's worth. But I like the way that you're thinking. Again, and we're working with them. They actually have something called a TOD policy. That's a draft policy that they've adopted. So they recognize the importance of the connections between transportation and land use. And certainly Secretary Pollack, if you've ever heard her talk about this, she certainly believes in the connections of transportation and land use. But I don't want to take up too much of Peter's time.
If there aren't any more questions from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we'll move on to Peter Milano. Peter, do you want me to share? You sent over a PDF. Do you want me to share the PDF, or do you have something you'd like to share?
I'd love if you did that, if you drove. Otherwise, if you don't, I can do it, whichever you prefer.
I can put the PDF up on here.
And I actually planned for a little bit less time than Chris. She's working on something a little more challenging, rolling out something new. So thank you very much, counselor and counselors and members of the Salem team. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I am not new to Salem, although coverage of Salem from the Mass Office of Business Development team has changed over the last 3 years to my colleague Maria DiStefano. I still love being in Salem. I actually I tend to end up there on Father's Day because that's probably the one day a year I get to pick where we go for a restaurant. So the Mass Office of Business Development, as you all are aware, we are an executive branch agency. I also report to Secretary Mike Keneally. We are a very small agency. We actually have 12 employees, 7 what we call regional directors and 5 administrators. The administrators all own a particular program, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. Next slide, please, Counselor. So many of these will have a slide, but we'll talk about this. So what we have here is many of the programs that I think that your team will want to talk about. The Economic Development Incentive Program, that is the core deliverable of the Mass Office of Business Development. I'll talk about that on a future slide. Regional Economic Development Organization, we in government like acronyms, we call that REDO. I'll talk about that on a future slide as well. Regional Pilot Program grants, that'll be coming up. Those are 2 grant programs that we provide here at the Mass Office of Business Development to partner agencies. So I'll cover them in a second. Workforce Training Fund has its own slide. Financing partnerships. So one of the big things that the Office of Business Development does is we are the liaison for the administration. We're the sales team. We partner with many of our agency partners. Financing is one of the big things that companies come to us and say we need. One of the prime organizations that we work with is Mass Development. Mass Development has folks that can work with companies with Salem being a gateway city. Many of your programs are very prime for your companies, whether it's manufacturers or land developments in the city. And our partners at Mass Development are usually very responsive, or actually always responsive. Not all of the products would be the perfect fit for what might be what we bring to them, but Mass Development is very active within the city. They also can finance affordable housing and nonprofits. Sector-specific resources, what that means is we have a few quasi-public partners that work only in their sectors. What that means is we have the Mass Life Sciences Center, one of our very active partners. They're only set up to handle life science companies, whether it's biopharma or medical devices. If a company fits into those two buckets, they're a perfect partner. We have the Mass Clean Energy Center, perfect partner for clean energy companies. They have great expertise and can assist growing companies in those fields. Mass Technology Collaborative, they have quite a few different buckets under their umbrella, whether it's cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, things like that would go into those sector-specific resources. And it all basically comes down to partnerships. The Mass Office of Business Development, we're big on partnering. We call it Team Massachusetts. So if you have somebody in Salem that wants to start a business, move a business, many times we'll get the lead and bring it to you. Our cities are our biggest source of referrals. Cities will bring leads to us. We'll work on bringing an offer to companies and work with our partners in municipal government. COVID-19 Business Resource Liaison. This wasn't something that we thought we'd be involved with, but reopening Massachusetts became a big part of what our team had to get involved with. And the reopening plan through the governor, lieutenant governor, and our secretary became a big part of what the Mass Office of Business Development had to do. We've segued out of reopening and into recovery, but we're still a resource for the reopening plan. Startup assistance, and especially for the city of Salem, because our regional director actually sits at Salem State University, and our partners at the North Shore Alliance allow us to sit there, and the Mass Small Business Development Center is housed. So startup assistance is something that in the city of Salem, you have great infrastructure there, great partners. International trade, not a big item, but if in fact it does come up, we have an office through the agency called the Mass Office of International Trade and Investments. Export development, potential grants for companies that are looking to develop their exporting of up to $10,000. We can work with any company that's looking to develop markets outside of the United States. Site selection is a big thing that we do. One of our partners called Mass Econ can assist companies. Now, that's not something that we would obviously market to a company in Salem and try to pull them out of your city. But the sites that you have in your city would be something that we may want to market to companies that are either outside of Massachusetts or outside of the country. Permanent regulatory assistance, that's something I would work with Tom Daniels on. Many times companies want to know how hard and how long is the permitting process before they would get involved with looking at a city like Salem. And quite frankly, the process has been very, very satisfying for companies looking at Salem, especially with city form of government. We haven't had any challenges. We haven't had any company look at Salem and say, I'm not going there because of the permitting challenges or simply not being able to get a specific type of permit. And lastly, infrastructure support. Chris referenced MassWorks. We have a new portal. It's called the One Stop Portal. And City of Salem has done well at receiving infrastructure support from the Commonwealth. And my suspicion is that's not going to change. We'll move forward. Any type of infrastructure that a company might want to partner with the city on, the state is always looking to potentially partner with you. So next slide. As I told you, the core deliverable of the agency is our tax incentive program. The city has used this only twice since the Baker-Polito administration has taken office. I say only because you've been smart, you've grown smart. This is a program that's But for these incentives, this wouldn't happen. The two companies that have used it were Nomkiag LLC and Hotel Salem in 2017 and 2016. What this is a partnership that is formed between a participating growing company whereby the company, the city, and the state partner in a particular development, with each part of the partnership agreeing to bring something forward. The company agrees to provide net new jobs in the Commonwealth as well as the city. And if they have jobs in the state right now, they would agree to retain those jobs. The company would also agree to a capital expenditure. The city would agree to provide real estate tax relief based on the increased value that that capital expenditure will create. And that relief will be between 5 and 100% of the increased value for a term of between 5 and 20 years. And this relief has a name. It's called a tax increment financing agreement. And the city may also provide personal property tax exemptions. The personal property tax exemptions would be on the same schedule, 5 to 100% of the value, 5 to 20 years. And then lastly, the state may provide state tax credits. Taken all together, that is the state's economic development incentive program. We also have an additional piece. It's called the vacant storefront program. And this is where we could use this program in the downtown. If there's any parcels that have been vacant for at least a year, the city may want to partner with a small business operator. And this is where we could potentially partner. If the city wanted to contribute money to that small business operator, the state could also provide up to $10,000 in refundable tax credits. And that's something that we would certainly welcome the opportunity of working with you on. Next slide, please, Counselor. So one of the things that I'm sure you've all heard of is I've already talked about the regional pilot program grants. Those haven't even been awarded yet. They're going to be awarded this week, $5 million worth of grants to partner agencies. Mass Office of Travel and Tourism, that's the grants to companies that want to market internationally. Mass Growth Capital Corp, you'll see that there. I'm actually the chair of that board. These are sector-specific grants that have been awarded to companies that have been hardest hit by COVID. The numbers have been really, really difficult to bear, but something on the order of up to over 14,000 grants have been awarded. There's been over 3,700 restaurants, and more than 5,000 of those awards have gone to minority or women-owned businesses. There's going to ultimately be $725 million in grants awarded through the program. And that is more than any state in the whole country that has done for COVID-related businesses. Next slide, please. Workforce development. The North Shore Workforce Investment Board covers Salem. I work statewide. So I go from Pittsfield to Provincetown, Boston, North Shore, South Shore. You have a gem. You have a great workforce investment board. You have a career center right in Salem, right in downtown, across from City Hall. The career center can assist companies with recruitment assistance, workforce training fund grants, which are grants, 50-50 matching fund grants, whereby the state could contribute up to 50% of a company's training program. And the beauty of these grants is that while the state on a successful grant application would contribute cash into the training account of the company, the state wouldn't ask the company to contribute cash. We would simply ask for the company to pay their employees to go through the training program and take what's known as an in-kind contribution. So these are actual programs that you have right in your city. Honestly, I wouldn't say a hidden gem, but it's a gem of the North Shore. So, and one of the other programs that I like to illustrate is the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. It's a federal program, but companies can utilize a tax credit by putting individuals from certain targeted groups back to work, certainly less fortunate individuals. Next slide, please. So I just talked about the training grants, and I did that because I wanted to illustrate who can assist with them. We also have training grants through the Commonwealth for companies, and these are up to $25,000. They can be year over year, so companies can receive more than one training grant year after year, as long as you're not doing the same safety training year after year. We have a free safety consultation for companies, big or small, doesn't matter if you're, you can be the largest company in Salem or the corner store. Everybody's eligible for these programs. We are happy to assist any one of your constituents with accessing these programs. Next slide, please. I think that's going to bring us real close. So some of the programs, these are all free, by the way. So the Small Business Development Center, great team in the Northeast. SCORE sits there with the Mass Office of Business Development. Center for Women in Enterprise, they are based out of Boston, but they have representation. Veterans Business Outreach Center and Small Business Strong. That's something that's been a little bit more marketed since COVID. I think basically people have been really scouring, looking for programs that they can actually access online. Next slide, please. Here you'll see, I put together a slide with logos from partners of Team Mass. And forgive me to any partner that doesn't see their logo there, but I really wanted the slide to be balanced. so you'll see Commonwealth Corp, they do training grants. Mass Bio, Mass Econ, they do site selection. Mass Growth Capital, as I told you, they're doing the sector-specific grants. Mass Ventures is a venture capital firm that the state sponsors. Mass Tech Collaborative. Anything you see there, we're happy to make referrals to any one of your constituents. And then the next slide, please. I don't think you really needed the map, but I wanted to show you that up in the Northeast here you have, and I actually stripped the names because as I was doing this, I realized that one of our regional directors that I had listed on this map wasn't with us anymore. So once again, Maria DiStefano is the regional director. Tom knows her well, and I'm happy to facilitate anything and everything that might be needed with the city. And there's her email and mobile phone number, as well as mine. And that is the first time that PowerPoint has been used. We're trying to change things up a little bit. And I did notice while I was doing this a mistake on it. So forgive me.
Well, nobody else noticed it, I don't think, Peter. Thank you so much, Peter. That was very good. I'll open it up to the committee here in a minute. Just, I guess the first question, or the question that I get asked frequently around economic development is what are employers looking for when they're selecting communities or when they're making investments in communities? And then has that changed over the last 20, 30 years? And then what sorts of investments should we be making long-term in Salem to attract employers longer term?
Well, it's a great question. Employers are looking for stability. And companies are looking for stability. They want to know, can we come to a community and will we be able to invest? They're looking at the tax rate, but all in all, they just want to know, is this something that we're going to be okay 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Will our labor be there? We pitch Massachusetts on our labor, and let's face it, who has more labor availability than the North Shore? We love pitching our universities, with Salem State and North Shore Community College. I think that's the selling point of the city. Such a rich history there. What you don't have, and why you've not popped on many of our more recent, very large site searches, is you don't have a lot of very large real estate. And that's a compliment as much as it is as, just an obvious statement. Not a lot of cities like Salem have large tracts left. And more of the life sciences are looking for bigger tracts on one level. And let's face it, those were gobbled up many years ago.
Thank you. I asked that question because every time I go to the commute around, I look out and see all those people lined up working in high tech or working anywhere in closer to Boston. I always wonder what can we do here in Salem to the labor force is already here. We're already living here. How do we attract employers to come here? Anybody else, I guess from the committee, what questions do you all have for Peter? Councilor McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Great presentation and for both of you that did the presentations. I guess the question becomes, as we move out of a post-COVID era, hopefully in the next bunch of months, it kind of puts you two people at odds a little bit because, when you look at it post-COVID, a lot of people and a lot of businesses are realizing that they get a productive workforce from being remote. So you're going to see a lot of businesses lessen their footprint or not wanting to. You're going to see a lot of more of commercial / space be available because people are going to lessen their footprint. And then how do we move? And then the question becomes, if businesses don't need a bigger footprint, then how do we take advantage of either existing buildings that may be vacant or promoting whatever tracts of land that are left that may be zoned a certain way that businesses have never moved to for years, is to go to a housing, move them towards housing, because it seems like housing is the big push. And I've been a small builder for my whole life, working for, first with my father, now my own. And I do, the small stuff, additions. Every once in a while I'll build a home, remodels. And the slide that was put on earlier was telltale as to the amount of construction building for homes that went on previously when I was just a youngster and what's going on now. And I'm telling you, the difference, some of the difference today right now is, for the average person, when you go to the lumberyard and you go buy a piece of lumber, what it costs today is like just a few years ago was like 1/3 the cost. And so the construction costs are escalating exponentially due to materials, not even labor. And then so to be able to still construct structures and homes across the board for, it's not just, we need to provide housing across the spectrum of housing, from upscale to low income and everything in between. But at the same time, as we also want to try to attract businesses, but businesses, for lack of a 128 corridor per se, haven't been wanting to come to Salem. But now where everything is, you see a lot of high tech stuff, but they're not looking for the big footprint anymore. My son just took a job and he's working remote for his orientation for 2-3 weeks, and then he's going to be going part-time, and they're talking about maybe bringing him in like in a year. So how do you guys balance that out? I guess is the big question as we look at how we're going to move forward between the need for business and business growth and development with a changing economy and the need for housing.
Let you go first, Chris.
Okay. Well, thank you, Councilor McCarthy. One thing the pandemic really hit home is all of a sudden housing became even more important because it was now also your workplace. And so if you had crowded housing situation, if you didn't have stable housing situation, it became a real problem for people who were, might have been trying to work remote. Not everybody can work remote, but the need for stable housing became even more important. Again, there are many reasons also related to the pandemic and the health emergency and separate spaces, et cetera. But I would say that's one thing. I do think it's yet to be seen exactly what's going to shake out in terms of the commercial footprint and commercial offices. I do know that even prior to the pandemic, and this may not apply to all of Salem, but the commercial office park market was in the suburban areas, even built at parks that had been built out in the 90s were being converted into housing. Not all of them, but some of them were being converted into housing. Marlboro, the city of Marlboro had a major redevelopment process where they put in hotels and housing and commercial. So it became more mixed use area where you had rooftops where people would, could use the businesses and use the services such as restaurants in that area. So I let Peter maybe talk a little bit more about what he thinks is going to happen in the post-pandemic world in terms of commercial real estate.
It's a great question, and so it's something we're talking about now, because the question for us is, do we allow incentives for employees that are not going into offices? Part of this program is we want foot traffic. We want the community to benefit. The state's going to benefit if the employer is getting paid at the state level, but this only works if it's a partnership between the company, the municipality, and the state. So the emergency declaration is still ongoing, so it's really a moot point currently. But once the emergency declaration is lifted, which is really anybody's guess when that might happen, what's going to happen with the real estate? At this point, there's still activity in the commercial market. I don't know specifically as it pertains to Salem, but in the Boston and suburban market, CBRE and Cushman both put out reports that said that the demand is still amazingly there. Maybe not as strong as it was in 2018, but there is still demand for real estate. We're certainly looking at it, we're cautious. So I do think that this is something that we're going to keep very, very close tabs on. And like Chris said, I do know what she's talking about with regards to Marlboro. We just had a project in Lawrence. Now, Lawrence is a little bit of a different beast. We had approved a very large office building to enter this program. The developer withdrew before he even spent any money and switched it all over to housing.
I should mention also that I believe Salem is participating in the local rapid recovery planning program. Is that right, Tom? And so that is another program that is being stood up as part of COVID relief. It is primarily aimed at business districts and trying to help those, retail and lodging and other service businesses kind of think about what's going to happen next and how can they best be helped. But that's another program that's a brand new program. It's so new, it's not even on Peter's slide. I mean, it's just starting. It's just kicking off and just launching. So you do have that, which is funded by, I can't remember the value that you guys are getting, Tom, but it's a $9.5 million technical assistance program.
Any other questions from the Committee of the Whole or the Affordable Housing Trust Fund? Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our planner, and Peter, good to see you again. Thank you for your presentation. I worked for the planning department for some 14 years back in the 80s and 90s. But through the chair to our city planner, one of Peter's comments were very interesting, that the state would market Salem properties to businesses and assist the city of Salem in marketing them. I wonder if that is private properties. And Tom, do we have any properties in Salem that are now on the state list so that they can help us market and help recruit higher paying job businesses to the city of Salem? This is really good news.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and just first, I just want to say thank you to Chris and Peter for your presentations. It's great to see you both. So we work, the Enterprise Center at Salem State is or the North Shore Alliance, I'm sorry, because Laura Swanson wears both hats as Executive Director of the Enterprise Center and also the North Shore Alliance. So that is our regional economic development organization. And we do market priority development sites through them, which winds up on the state's promotional piece. I do want to just add that, a lot of the programs and tools that Chris and Peter have talked about are ones that we use in the economic development space. I'm so happy, Peter, that you plug Mass Hire and the Workforce Board, because they really are phenomenal. And so I think, when you're talking about economic development, as Peter put it, it's labor, land, and financing, or you can say, people, dirt, and money. But it's those three legs that make up an economic development program. And it's something where we are really fortunate on the workforce side that we have the Workforce Board right here. So I sit on that board as well. And that's it's not just about people who are looking for work, it's working with employers to help them develop training programs or collaborating with regional institutions of higher learning for training programs. This phenomenal program right now in advanced manufacturing. There are jobs available, 400 jobs. It's not in Salem, but it's one labor market in Danvers. And so there's a disconnect with this current opportunity in terms of transportation. So we're working with the North Shore WIB, traffic and parking and multiple communities to try and solve that transportation piece, because you can't get there on public transportation. So that's just one point with the Workforce Board. I think, more broadly, we do look at other tools, Opportunity Zones, which is a federal program. Not only did we get 2 census tracts designated as Opportunity Zones, Salem was one of 5 communities in Massachusetts that was taken under the wing by Smart Growth America, their locus land development programs. This is a national organization, and they've been promoting our Opportunity Zones through their networks. And so that is Opportunity Zones. It's a program that provides a tax benefit to investors. It's kind of the shorthand version of it, but it helps in the marketing of Salem for new employment opportunities. We work with local businesses to help them stay and grow. And we've used the EDIP program a number of times with businesses like Thermal Circuits and Salem Glass, Jacqueline's Wholesale Bakery. A&J King was a smaller one that we did as well. So we work with those financing programs. We try and help businesses find real estate opportunities. As Peter said, one of the challenges is we don't have a large number of large sites. So we're working with the sites we have, or when there's a vacancy that's appropriate. So I know, Councillor Dibble, I've gone on a bit more beyond your specific question, but your specific question, yes, we are working with not just the North Shore Alliance in the state, but also with others in terms of marketing opportunities for Salem, in addition to our own recruitment program that we work with the Chamber and Main Streets on.
Great. Thank you, Tommy. Mr. Chair, if I continue one sentence, if I may?
Sure.
Thank you. Peter, your comments were right on the money. I agree with Tom on the Career Center. We're lucky to have it right across the street from City Hall. I used them briefly when I owned my own company to secure a couple additional employees. I wound up hiring just one. I was looking for 2. So that Career Center is phenomenal. Then years later, I used them again when I was changing careers, if you would, and they helped me get started again in business development. It was amazing staff across the street from City Hall. And you begin to say it's almost unknown. I agree with you. It's very little known in Salem. I think we need to promote that a lot more, because they will help people find jobs. They will help businesses get stronger in all different ways. Their trainings are phenomenal there. So when I first became a city councilor, we voted on one TIF, and I thought it was a great program. And I'm saying this is a great way of bringing businesses into the city of Salem. I think we need to use that more, but that's a conversation for Salem later. So Peter, again, thank you. Nice presentation, and Chris as well.
Thank you, Councilor Bill. Councilor Turiel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Sorry I had to cut out for a little while, but I was cooking dinner in the early part of the meeting. So, and then I had to eat it. I thank you to Peter and Chris for both coming to present. I watched all of the first presentation and most of the second. So I have one, I guess, question to to whomever can jump in and answer us. One of the things is that's created a lot of friction over the last few years in Salem, and has inspired a lot of the people complaining about what they perceive to be overdevelopment and all the like, is we have a lot of sites here in Salem that are not super large, but have some size to them. They are in entrance corridors. They've been zoned for predominantly commercial use in old zoning with the thought that somebody would take these and turn them into some sort of commercial usage. And I don't know what exactly was envisioned back in those days when the zoning was done, but most of those lots have sat unoccupied for a long time, or were commercially zoned but had a couple of single family homes on them, for instance. So a lot of our proposals in recent years have involved those sort of commercial reuse sites, or sites that had previously had a commercial entity on it. And I know Salem has some challenges in trying to attract larger scale commercial sites, but if somebody could speak to and address sort of that split that we have, the issues that we face, if we could hear somebody addressing that dilemma a little bit, as housing in many of these cases, theoretically in Salem, we would prefer in many of these for the commercial use to continue or to actually happen, because jobs, taxes, higher tax rate and all the like. But on a commercial, but we have the housing demand, we have the housing need, and then there's the cost involved. So if somebody one of you could speak to that from the state level and, compare it to what we're seeing around the state as a whole, I'd appreciate a little bit of that, just to sort of, make sure everybody here in this discussion and in the city really is on the same page.
Thank you, Councilor Turiel. I'm not super familiar with Salem, so I'm sorry I don't know the exact specifics that you're looking at. What I do know is that Salem, through the regional planning agency, MAPC, has embarked on several years of investigating what the specific housing needs are, looking at the demographics, looking at your affordability gap, trying to figure out what kind of housing is needed. That is certainly the first step and a good process. Zoning can be very passive, as you were saying, Councillor. You have zoning that's kind of sits there, and zoning is only one way the way I you say is it sets the table, but you still need people to come and eat. You still need people, you need a property owner who wants to do something. You need so people own property for a whole variety of different reasons. Sometimes they just want to let it sit. So you need to have some action at the property owner level for anything to happen. And that's one of the things when I talk about accessory dwelling units, they're not going to happen everywhere. It makes it the zoning makes it possible for it to happen. It sets a table, but you still have to have a lot of other things happen. Often people need capital to do development. And so that's sometimes a missing piece. And that's, as I mentioned to an earlier question, a whole variety of state programs around funding for housing, and how, you have community development corporations and community development finance institutions, CDFIs, that know how to use those and know how to take advantage of them. So I would say, zoning is certainly, if it's a barrier to somebody doing what you want to do, for example, mixed use development, or something that could allow for either commercial use or retrofit to residential use, is certainly one way to approach that. And again, I'm saying that without saying that is the answer for you, but just that is one way that communities are dealing with kind of stuck properties, is what you're talking about. But again, zoning just sets the table. And one of the reasons we wanted to do the housing choice legislation was we have the state has money to give to developers who want to do affordable housing, but they often need a zone change or something. And so that's why, that housing choice legislation will make some zoning changes easier to do. And I'm very sorry, I apologize. I do have a commitment with my family this evening. And so I'm going to have that be my last word. I'm sure Peter will say something much more wise.
Never.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Councilor Terrell, I have two things to add to that, and this is, and with great apologies and through the chair, sorry about that. This is going to, forgive me, Tom and your team, if you've already done this. And I don't know which sites you have in mind, but the governor will, through our economic bill, which we announced in Salem, and that was the last time we met with all of our colleagues, was I think right after that meeting, we all went home and pretty much never left our houses again.
I was there.
Yeah. So that is now a law. So the economic development, gosh, I just had a blank, Partnerships for Recovery. So through that program, through that law, there's a couple of programs that pop into my mind. One is and remember, these are 5-year capital plans, but there was $40 million set aside for revitalizing underutilized properties. And that will support the redevelopment of underutilized blighted properties, abandoned properties, if that's the case. This would be targeted investments to help address the costs, including those related to code compliance and things of the like. This is part of the Community One-Stop portal. So a letter, an expression of interest would need to be submitted on the state's One-Stop portal. And that's something I probably breezed over too quickly in my presentation. But I'll get to that in 1 second. Additionally, we, in that legislation, was $15 million additional for site readiness, which is a program to support the site assembly and assessment and pre-development and permitting for sites. It sounds like similar to what you're talking about, Counselor. This is also part of the One-Stop portal, and an expression of interest letter would need to be drafted on that. Now, let me tell you why I say this, because it doesn't get any easier. Today's the 29th of March. Expressions of interest are due by April 2nd. Doesn't have to be rocket science, but April 2nd is the deadline to submit expressions of interest. That doesn't mean that if you don't submit an expression of interest, the state wouldn't fund any of the projects that you're thinking of, Councilor Terrell. You could go directly to project application, but the team would have an opportunity to read an expression of interest and work through it with the team from the city of Salem. Mm-hmm. It's the preferred method right now. So if you have the specifics of the project, even if it's just a thumbnail sketch, we'd love to get an expression of interest by April 2nd.
Okay, thank you. My thinking is we all here like to get commercial development in sites because, as I said, it brings in commercial tax rate, which is higher and helps offset some of the residential burden. Yeah. It provides people employment. The downsides of commercial usage are it tends to deliver, in most cases, more traffic, depending on for the amount of jobs versus the amount of residents. An equivalent amount of workers versus an equivalent amount of residents tend to have more of an impact on traffic. And also, sometimes those uses can have a detrimental impact on the site itself. But in our case, what has been here in Salem is we have a lot of those sites now. A lot of them are in the Highland Avenue corridor, for instance, that our Ward 3 councilor represents, where we've had commercially zoned parcels that never did develop any interest in 10, 20, 30 years of being zoned commercially. and then now are getting interest as residential property development because of the housing shortage and because of all that demand, and frankly because prices have accelerated so much.
Right.
So it's, you know, we have a very finite amount of land that's available to develop or redevelop. We have demand that has really stagnated for the most part for generations, but now we have a different kind of demand that has accelerated in recent years based on our shortage of housing and the ability of real estate developers to maximize that value at this point, and resulting in new growth that isn't always the growth that people want. I mean, we were speaking about the accessory dwelling units. I know we'll be taking that up at our public hearing tomorrow. The arguments against that, for instance, here in the city tend to go to one of two possibilities. One argument is, why are we doing it? Nobody's going to build them. And the other argument is, why are we doing this? Everybody's going to build them. And, you know, the reality of that, and in most cases the demand is what it is, and only people who can do that are going to do those. And we know that, and we'll cover that heavily in the next couple of days. But I think in terms of the commercial versus residential conundrum, when you have a city with limited resources of land and building opportunities, and you have demand that's really skewed in a certain way, and there's such that people own the land and people who own the land have a fundamental right in the end to try and do something that's compatible with the city's vision on it. So I just wonder, like, I love to see jobs grow. I love to see employment grow. I love to see commercial usage grow. But I also look at the reality that that's not, for the most part, we need to seize those opportunities whenever possible. And I'm grateful that the state has a willingness and has programs in place to try and assist us in doing that. And I'll give commendation to Tom and the planning department in trying to work with these companies as well. But I also acknowledge the reality that a lot of what people are looking to do is the jobs are there. We just don't have any place for people to live.
Tom.
Thank you, Councilor Hapworth. I just wanted to add, I think, just a reminder, we did apply for a grant from the federal government through the Economic Development Administration and received close to $700,000 as a grant that will be over 2 years. And one component of that grant is looking at an economic diversification study. And so it's looking at what are the opportunities that Salem has to layer in additional sectors or grow different employment opportunities, especially taking into consideration post-pandemic work. And for, many people have been working remotely, but many people have not been working remotely. But where that shakes out, is there an advantage that Salem can leverage in looking at that? So that's a longer term piece just that I wanted to put out there as part of that opportunity to grow employment opportunities in Salem.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
We're coming up on 7:30 now. Any last questions for Peter before we let him go? Yeah, well, thank you so much, Peter. We really appreciate you coming out here. Excellent.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it too. If anybody needs me, my mobile phone number was on that presentation. Counselor, please share that.
Yep, I believe, actually, I think Eileen shared it out to the entire, at least to the Government Services Committee. I'm not sure if she shared out to the Committee of the Whole or not.
Thank you. Have a great evening. We'll see you.
Peter. Thank you very much, Peter.
I'll take one more motion from the committee. Councilor Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion to adjourn.
We got a motion to adjourn from Councilor Dibble. Second from somebody. Councilor Prosnewski. Councilor McCarthy. Take a roll call vote. Councilor Prosnewski.
Yes.
Councilor Dibble.
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy.
Yes.
Me, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 in the affirmative, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tom,
Thank
and
you,
everybody
folks.
else. Thank you, Ty.